Most people dream of being rich, owning mansions, driving luxury cars, and never worrying about money. For one billionaire, this was his reality. He had everything: wealth, power, and success. But something was missing. Despite having more money than he could ever spend, he felt disconnected from real life. Everywhere he went, people treated him with respect. But he wondered, was it because of who he was, or just because of his wealth? One day, he had an idea. He wanted to see the world through different eyes, to understand how people treated those who had nothing. So he made a bold decision. He would leave behind his identity, his wealth, and his comfortable life. He would walk the streets as a homeless man, experiencing the struggles firsthand. What he didn't know was that this journey would change everything. The billionaire stood in front of a mirror, looking at himself one last time before shedding his identity. His expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and polished shoes, everything screamed wealth. But that was about to change. He grabbed an old pair of jeans, a torn hoodie, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. Clothes no one would look twice at. Then he rubbed dirt on his hands and face, making sure he looked unrecognizable. His clean-shaven face was now covered with light stubble, making him appear rough and tired. To complete the disguise, he took a small, empty backpack. No phone, no wallet, no security team, just him in the streets. As he stepped outside, he felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. For the first time in years, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just another man, lost in the crowd. No one turned to look at him, no one greeted him with respect. He had officially become invisible. His journey had begun. The billionaire walked through the busy streets, his head slightly lowered. He wanted to see how people reacted to him now that he looked like he had nothing. He approached a businessman in a suit and asked, "Excuse me, sir, can you spare $1 for some food?" The man didn't even look at him. He simply waved his hand dismissively and kept walking. A woman with a shopping bag noticed him coming and quickly crossed the street, clutching her purse tightly. He sighed and kept moving. His stomach was already starting to feel empty, but he had no way to buy food. He entered a small convenience store, hoping to find something cheap. As he walked in, the cashier's eyes locked on him. "Hey, you can't be in here," the man shouted. "I just need some water," the billionaire said. "Get out before I call the police," the cashier snapped. He left the store, shocked at how fast people judged him. Just yesterday, he could have bought the entire place. Today, they treated him like dirt. As he walked past a cafe, he saw a well-dressed man throwing half a sandwich in the trash. His stomach growled. He never imagined food would be so hard to get. The world looked completely different from down here. Hours passed, and hunger gnawed at his stomach. He hadn't eaten since the morning, and now the sun was beginning to set. He sat on a bench, watching people walk by with coffee cups and bags of food. He never thought he'd be in a position where a simple meal felt impossible to get. He checked his pockets, just a few coins, not enough for a real meal. Desperate, he stood near a food cart, hoping to find something cheap. "Excuse me, sir," he said to the vendor. "Is there anything I can get for this?" He held out his small handful of change. The vendor barely glanced at him. "That's not enough," he said, turning his attention to the next customer. The billionaire sighed and walked away. After a while, he saw a small shop with fresh bread in the window. He stepped inside, expecting the same treatment as before. But to his surprise, the older man behind the counter gave him a warm look. "Hungry?" the shop owner asked. The billionaire nodded. The man grabbed a loaf of bread, wrapped it in a napkin, and handed it to him. "Take it," he said. "No charge." For the first time that day, someone showed him kindness. He mumbled a soft thank you and stepped outside, breaking off a piece of bread. As he chewed, he realized how much he had taken food for granted. But his journey was far from over. As night fell, the billionaire realized he had nowhere to go. He walked aimlessly through the dimly lit streets, searching for a safe place to rest. Then, in a quiet alley, he saw a small group of people huddled around a makeshift fire. They sat on flattened, cardboard boxes, passing around a few pieces of food. He hesitated, then slowly walked toward them. One of the men, an older guy with a scruffy beard, noticed him first. "New around here?" he asked. The billionaire nodded. "Yeah, first night." The man gestured for him to sit. "Well, welcome to our little family. We don't have much, but you're welcome to join us." He sat down, feeling a strange sense of warmth in their presence. These people, who had nothing, were treating him better than most of the wealthy strangers he met earlier. A woman wrapped in a thin blanket looked at him. "How'd you end up here?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "Just bad luck." She nodded. "Happens faster than you think." Another man, probably in his 50s, sighed. "I had a good job once. A home, a family. Then the company downsized, lost my job, then my savings, then my house. One thing leads to another, and here I am." The billionaire listened closely. These weren't lazy people. They weren't failures. They were just people who had been hit with hard times and never got the help they needed. The woman spoke again. "Most people walk past us like we don't exist, like we're not even human." He looked down, thinking about how he had once been one of those people. Now, he was one of them. And for the first time, he truly understood. The billionaire sat on a bench the next morning, staring at the sidewalk. His night had been cold and uncomfortable. Sleeping on the ground with nothing but a thin piece of cardboard had been harder than he imagined. Every part of his body ached. As people passed by, he watched their faces. Some glanced at him with pity. Others ignored him completely. Then a man in his 50s stopped. He had kind eyes and wore a simple jacket, not fancy but neat. He carried a small bag and looked at the billionaire with concern. "You okay, man?" the stranger asked. The billionaire hesitated. No one had asked him that since he started this journey. I'm just trying to get by," he said. The man nodded. "I've been there before." He sat down next to him and pulled out a wrapped sandwich from his bag. "Here, you need this more than I do." The billionaire was shocked. He had begged for food the day before and was treated like nothing. But this man, a complete stranger, was giving him a meal without hesitation. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. The man smiled. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing, and I know that sometimes kindness is all you need to keep going." The billionaire took the sandwich. It wasn't a fancy meal, but right now it meant everything. They talked for a while. The stranger listened to his story without judgment, without looking down on him. Before leaving, the man reached into his pocket and handed the billionaire a few dollars. "It's not much, but I hope it helps," he said. The billionaire looked at the money in his hand, speechless. He had met countless wealthy people in his life, yet this man, who had little to give, was the one showing true generosity. As the stranger walked away, the billionaire realized something. He had spent his life surrounded by money, but he had never seen real wealth until now. And he knew he couldn't let this moment go to waste. The billionaire couldn't stop thinking about the kind stranger. That simple act of generosity had done something to him. It wasn't about the sandwich or the few dollars. It was about the kindness, the genuine concern from someone who had no reason to care. The next day, he made a decision. It was time to reveal who he really was. He returned to his mansion, took a long shower, and changed into one of his finest suits. The same man who had been ignored and rejected just a day ago now looked powerful and important again. He stepped into his luxury car and drove to the area where he had met the kind stranger. As he parked, people stared. This time they noticed him. This time they respected him. He spotted the man walking down the street, carrying the same small bag. The billionaire got out and walked toward him. "Excuse me, sir," he said. The man turned and hesitated. He didn't recognize him. "It's me," the billionaire said. "The man you helped yesterday." The stranger's eyes widened. He looked at the billionaire's expensive suit, the shiny car behind him, and then back at his face. I don't understand," the man said. The billionaire smiled and handed him an envelope. "Open it." The man hesitated before carefully tearing it open. Inside, there was a letter and a check for an amount that made his hands shake. His eyes filled with tears. What is this?" "It's a thank you," the billionaire said. "You helped me when I had nothing, and I want to return the kindness." The man looked up, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." The billionaire put a hand on his shoulder. "Just keep being the person you are. The world needs more people like you." The man wiped his eyes, unable to speak. For the billionaire, this wasn't just about money. It was about something deeper. It was about seeing the value in people, not because of what they had, but because of who they were. And he wasn't done yet. The billionaire wasn't finished. His journey had opened his eyes, and now he knew he had to do more. He returned to the alley where he had met the homeless community. This time, he wasn't in ragged clothes, he wasn't hungry or desperate, he was himself again. The billionaire they never knew. As he approached, the same scruffy man from before looked up. His eyes widened in shock. "You?" he said, barely recognizing him. The billionaire nodded. "It's me." He reached into his pocket and handed the man a thick envelope. "This is for you and everyone here. Use it to get food, shelter, whatever you need." The group stared at him, stunned. The woman with the thin blanket covered her mouth in disbelief. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. The billionaire took a deep breath. "Because I finally understand." He didn't just hand out money, he took action. He contacted shelters and donated a large sum to expand their resources. He spoke to organizations that work to help the homeless and promised long-term funding. But he went even further. He personally hired some of the people he had met, giving them jobs in his companies. He offered them training, housing, and a chance to start over. News of his experience spread quickly. Reporters wanted interviews. Business leaders were shocked by what he had done. Some praised him, others thought he was crazy. But the billionaire didn't care. He had seen the truth. He had lived it. And he knew that wealth wasn't just about money, it was about using it to make a difference. As he stood outside one of the new shelters he helped fund, he watched as people walked in, people who had once been invisible to the world. Now they had a chance. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something deeper than success. He felt purpose.